them in the chat. We'll be happy to jump into them. If you just want to say hi to us, that's more than welcome as well. So again, we're excited to have another episode of this. And without further ado, to have my good friend Benjamin on with us as well. Benjamin, I'm not going to steal your thunder. I'm going to let you present yourself and tell us a little about what you do and alternative partners and everything like that.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on this. My name is Benjamin Reynolds. I am the founder and principal of Alternative Partners. We are a RevOps as a service consulting company. We are strictly speaking tech agnostic, but we have a very strong Salesforce background. Personally, I guess the elevator pitch of my adult life was I went to music conservatory and then graduated, had no idea how to pay rent, stumbled onto Salesforce by accident in the late aughts, I decided nothing. I tripped and fell into a corporate tech job by Craigslist, and then just kind of did consulting, nonprofit, international financial services, high tech, moved out to the West Coast, started my own gig, and here we are. A fairly normal story, I think, that many people in Salesforce specifically can relate to in one way, shape, or form or other. We're doing RevOps because part of what it is to us is this holistic alignment framework, trying to de-silo things. And I know many people here have experience with either being a small business person or having a side gig, or maybe that's your current life. And it just kind of seems like when you're that small, the mindset is it would never occur to me to make these silos. And that's the mindset we try to bring into our larger engagements as well when we try to break down these barriers between teams. How are we doing on that?
I love that. I absolutely love it. I think the most unique thing about it that I'll take away from a lot of that, one, the music background I absolutely love. I think more than that, obviously we see the guitars in the back, and I know you and I've had a lot of conversations about it. I think the other unique thing, and I'm looking through our attendee list. I've spoken with so many folks that jump on shOPS Talk with us, or customers or partners of ours, and I think the biggest thing is that there is no common denominator for how you get into operations. That's for sure. Obviously music. We had Manas on very first episode where he talks about his background coming from education into operations. And I think, I challenge everybody here. If there's somebody out there that actually has a Salesforce undergraduate degree, let me know. But I think the reality is, or even operations for that matter, I think, we see this so much in business. There's a lot of entrepreneur degrees you can go get. There's finance degrees, accounting, attorneys. There's not, a specific degree, I don't think, for business operations or revenue operations, especially for CRM management, from what I can tell. So, maybe one day we'll create the class for it. But, I think the unique background I love because I think it also helps shed light on how we can start to think creatively. There's no doubt in my mind you've probably taken something from your music career and somehow spun that into an operational practice. So, I think the coolest thing that we'll be talking about today, obviously what you were already speaking of about being in the RevOps as a service industry, and I love that. That is something I'm gonna profoundly kind of bang my hand on the table and say is new. Like I don't think we were seeing RevOps or sales ops as a service. We're gonna dive into that, but I think sort of part of these guiding principles, and especially what we came here to talk about more than anything today, is just sort of this secret sauce for high performance sales and marketing operations teams. There's a ton to unpack there. But before we get into that, really what the secret sauce is, I think it's most important. Any secret sauce can only be made because of challenges that are presented in it. So maybe we start there. What are your thoughts around some of the biggest challenges that these teams face in some of these high performance environments?
So from my perspective, from my experience and what I've seen, a lot of it comes from recognizing that your primary customers when you're in ops are going to be the internal, often the individual contributors and the management that is responsible for their deliverables at a higher leadership level. So you are a largely, though not necessarily entirely, internal facing role. And there's a lot of interpersonal and professional stress that comes from that because they don't necessarily know what goes into manifesting their goals. Let me rephrase that. They know what their goals are. They don't necessarily have the best perspective onto the technical aspects. Like they're not going to be a Marketo expert if they are like your events coordinator, or they're not going to be a Pipedrive or Copper or Salesforce admin if they are a qualifying or closing rep. It's not their job. to really understand what this is. So the expectations for how quickly things can be turned around, it's all value to them. And very little of it is going to be this empathic understanding of the process.
Mhm.
So I'm going to go down on the hill that the thing that causes the most friction and the thing that also makes it glide is going to be having that human communication first and foremost. Being able to set expectations and have a conversation about if they're going to be met, what a reasonable timeline is. Um, I know that when I was working full time, the thing I was most proud of was convincing everyone that we're not rolling things out midweek. Like we have a deployment process. Um, I'm hearing people talk about DevOps more and more,
Mhm.
specifically in Salesforce, um, but they're talking about it for development. This should be like a sales and marketing ops conversation as well. It's about um, having a predictable cadence
Yeah.
for how we address these things. I don't. Does that sound? How does that sound to you? Is that something that you like resonate with, or?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, even Jackie said it's such a stellar point. You're spot on. I think the one thing that we index a lot on when we talk about this, even in WizOps and on the Sonar side, is what so many of our operations teams are doing is not too far dissimilar from what I don't know, software engineers are doing. And that sounds goofy, but bear with me here. You think about a normal software engineer. What is their normal mantra? What are they doing? What are they doing on a daily basis? They're taking business requirements, turning them into a technical solution. And now they're doing some wizardry of their own behind the scenes that is way more advanced than what I could do on the development side. But when we think about taking a big problem, taking the technologies we use and that we're all most familiar with, especially on the Salesforce side, and creating value for our customers. Now, our customers are internal, right? They're our sales team, our marketing team, our customer success team. But when you go in this methodology, and again, I think what makes a supercharged, sales ops and rev ops and marketing ops, everything ops group is how do you get consistent deployment across that? How do you make sure that your end users know how often those changes are going to be made? I think we've all been there. We've all probably learned our lessons the hard way of making changes too fast. Oh, you need a new pick list value on opportunity stage? Oh, great. Let me just, okay, that's done. And you don't take your time thinking about all the repercussions, all the up and downstream impacts. And that's what comes back and bites you. And now, to your point, I think you're seeing this DevOps framework come in now to where, all right, let's roll out some of these releases. Let's take about
Yeah.
2 weeks and make sure that thing that we're going to do works for the whole business. What a novel thought, right?
Like, I mean, anyone who's dealt with that part of a company as well, like, there's when I have these conversations, and I think about conversations I've had with engineers and people in comp sci or in product, when they talk about their product roadmap for the next 6 months, and you try to get something in there, it just doesn't fucking happen,
Yeah.
right? Like it's
No,
and you don't question it either.
nope.
Like the we've acknowledged somehow that that gets to be sacrosanct, but we don't take that same consideration for ourselves in ops. And I think there's a real opportunity to try to dial that in a little bit more.
You're you're spot on. And I think as
Yeah.
we kind of look through some of these like points that we've talked about, kind of leading up to this, when we think about what makes a high performing sales and marketing ops team, and I think just in general in a great business practice, it's the great. You have to be an expert and an absolute wizard of the ability of how to say no. There's a great podcast, or just even a section from Tim Ferriss reading a book about this, about how to say no gracefully. I would encourage everyone to
Mm.
look at it. I think we talked about this last time, maybe with Pete too. But engineers, they'll tell you this. Hey, I've already got a 6 month roadmap right here. I don't get to squeeze this other wedge in of this feature. Like, no, we're very rigid about this. We're going to be very pointed on how we do it. I think in talking with so many folks, I know a lot of these folks as attendees personally, because we've had some conversations about it, we just get put under such stress sometimes and fire like, no, we've got to go get that in right now. So I think there's an innate ability that we all have to hold of how to say no gracefully, right?
Yeah.
Um, good.
That grace point is really key. Yeah.
It is.
Um,
It's tough, right? Like, um, and again, my background in operations and doing Salesforce consulting, we're almost trained somewhat to say yes. Like we want to enable and we want to be able to build right solutions. But so it almost sounds counterintuitive to say, no, you always have to say no. I think it comes more to like challenging why that update or why that change needs to be made and make sure it fits across the whole business. Um, speaking of that, we talk about this often, but you think about these siloing of departments and how do we work better to get them aligned. I think talking with you so often, knowing how you're providing this as a service, obviously your logo isn't the same logo as the people that you're working with, right? You're as a consulting service doing this, but how do you even in some of those regards start to align some of these teams when you know they're a little dysfunctional, maybe a little dramatic with each other? Sales might hate marketing, marketing might hate sales, everybody might hate finance, whatever. How do you start to align some of these folks, and how can you get some of that secret sauce in the alignment?
Mm. One of the questions that you can usually ask, because it's so hyperbolic, it usually gets a bit of a laugh, but it's often, there's usually some like substance to it as well, is do you believe as an organization that any of your functional business teams have diametrically opposed KPIs?
Mm,
Do you believe, for example, or whether or not it's true, do you have the belief that marketing is being like financially incentivized to produce MQLs that are bad for sales? Do you believe that SDRs have spiffs that incentivize them to perform activity that makes marketing look bad? Um, and how can we like get rid of this? It's not that competition is bad. I don't believe that. I believe that competition can be healthy. But I believe that when you have manufactured competition by setting unnecessary stress points, that you are doing everyone a disservice by not putting everyone on the same team. At the end of the game, we're a bit of a utilitarian paperclip making machine, right? We're trying to drive revenue, and revenue is not marketing or sales. Revenue, if anything, is finance. It's cash in the bank. Um, and if your entire stack isn't serving that goal because you've created this artificial pain point,
yeah.
um, let's have a conversation about that.
You're spot on. Yeah, I think what's interesting about that, and you bring up a good point, when you start to go down the route of like the competition side of it. We've had so many conversations on this session or on this webinar, as well as a lot of other forums. Vanity metrics. Vanity metrics are awful, but there's sometimes like you can almost create this new category of those, called competitive metrics, if you will. Like, am I creating a false sense of like success? And we hear this battle sometimes between sales and marketing, where it's like, is that MQL really an MQL? And I mean, is that really going to turn into a true form opportunity for us? And you start to falsify how some of those work and react to each other. And again, it becomes a little contentious, little competitive. And I think when we start to see the right companies get this great sales and marketing alignment and get that secret sauce in there, you're right. There's a common denominator there, and it's called revenue. And revenue also impacts finance. And if you don't think that does, go ask any one of your CFOs or VPs of finance or any business owner how often they log into their bank account. I can guarantee you they will tell you that's what drives a business. And so if revenue's coming in, that's great. And if it's coming in at the right rate and all that. And again, finance isn't closing deals. We know sales is closing them. Sales isn't always sourcing them. Marketing sourcing them. So there's always just this perfect little circle that we're all walking through. But when you start to think about these pure drivers and the secret sauce, let's just call it out loud. Like, the secret sauce to this is if your revenue is aligned to your goals across every group, you're in really good shape. Like, go your finance team. Are we collecting on time? How many overdue invoices do we have? That should be a revenue generating goal. Sales, obviously we could talk about sales and marketing revenue alignments, but if you're all marching in that same beat and knowing that some of these micro metrics or even vanity metrics still boil down to top line revenue, and bottom line revenue for that matter too, I think you're going to be in good shape. Um, we'll we'll switch a little gears here. I know we said that we were talking about it, when you and I were catching up earlier today, but also now there is a rise in this revenue operations as a service. I mean, look at what you're doing with you and your company, and we absolutely love it. I think I'm curious to get your opinion of this. You're walking that mile, as a lot of folks are walking it. Some folks on this webinar, and some folks in WizOps. We're all seeing this revolution happen. What is driving that? What do you think some of these big pieces of it are that are making this new wave of operations as a service? Obviously, that's what you're doing with alternative partners, which we love. Tell us some of the secret sauce there that you're seeing.
So I have uh, my is it still no nuance November? Yeah, okay.
Sure.
So here's my general thought here. There's like this new wave of millennials who are no longer literal children in leadership positions in Silicon Valley. There's this new generation of like 35 to 36 and early 40-year-old leaders at startups specifically who grew up with hippie parents, and they've been fed the capitalist tale, and they're starting to realize that like the giant enterprise corporations that they might have heard as their as they were growing up in sort of this industry with these siloed teams that had very specific metrics. And they sort of grew up with this attitude of like, but actually, what if we just got along? RevOps is just capitalism meets being like a bit of a crystal hippie. Like,
Ooh, I
it
like that.
really is just that simple. It really is just so simple as we're all on the same team. Like, if I'm in sales and I have to go by the rules, can we just have the rules make sense for all of us? And I think we're just at this generational point where there's more people who are just kind of sick and tired of performative bullshit
Yeah,
for the sake of tradition.
yeah,
I don't think there's anything terribly magical about it. Um,
yeah. It,
and I also think a lot of us have the desire or have some experience of like, we have a small Etsy store, or like there's a greater percentage of people who have full-time day jobs, who have side hustles,
yeah.
who are empathetic to what it takes to run an entire business by themselves. So there's a greater understanding in more places of needing to have this through line. So more salespeople are asking marketing questions. More marketing people are asking customer success questions. Um, and so I think there's this emerging desire for to like not, in the back of my head, I Fiddler on the Roof playing is just
Yeah. Well, I'll agree with you. I think the one commonality I see so often when, look at what you and I both do professionally, like we talk to operations folks every day and we support the operations function. And I think if there's anything that is the common denominator for all of it is, you said it, the highest level of empathy across how most of these functions work across the departments. And let's be real honest here. We were talking about sort of this evolution of sales ops and rev ops and everything in other conversations. This hasn't been a profession for like 50 years. So when we say like the evolution of it, we're more so trailblazing, pun there,
mhm,
Jen, like that. You're welcome. Um, we are blazing some of these trails as to how this actually works in some of these businesses, right? And so when you think about how we're getting exposed to all these things, I think the coolest story that I hear from every ops leader in most companies is, yeah, part of my day job or my 60% of my job is supporting sales ops. But some of the fun parts that I really enjoy is, when I get pulled into that meeting with our CEO and they're preparing slide decks for the board meeting, like they come to me because I own all the data. Like that's fun. Like, and that's not just in the same motions of making sure validation rules work correctly or process builders trigger in the right way. It's more strategic. And I think why this resource or why this person gets so much more empathy is because they see, oh wow, that sales number that we close on a quarterly basis has to get tracked the right way in customer
mhm,
success for retention and has to go down the billing the right way for finance. And so they get so many of these just cross-departmental conversations. I think it's a little hidden gem, honestly, for ops folks. It doesn't get called out too often in the job descriptions, in sales ops or in rev ops, but you're ops for the whole company. So um, I absolutely love it. Yeah, I think there's just so many different, again, little call it like little secret sauces to it all. But I think you said it best. The level of empathy that has to go into it for us to all get along. And looking at some of the comments we have in the chat section, like we need a T-shirt for this. Just I love it, and you're spot on with it, Benjamin. Uh, Good stuff. I know we got a few more minutes. We'll toss a couple of other easy, fun softball questions out there. Of course, for everyone on the meeting, feel free to drop questions in. We've got a little bit more for some Q&A to go through with this, but we always talk about this. We kind of rapid fire some of the same questions going on right now. Some are ops related, some have absolutely nothing to do with operations, but hit me with something that you are absolutely loving and digging right now on Netflix, Hulu, favorite TV show. What's top of your mind right now?
Oh, I watch most. Netflix stuff to sort of like rot my mind after a busy day. So the two big things that are easy to talk about, I'm a Great British Baking Show fan
Yes,
and Mandalorian. So those are kind of like the two things that I'm going for right now.
I love it.
What was the most recent binge? Oh, when I'm gonna throw the geek card down a little bit. When Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra came back to Netflix, I rewatched all of those in a heartbeat.
Love
Uh,
it.
those were the things that have been keeping me alive.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely love it. Well, that's one of those things too that every time we ask that question, it's so fun because over the course of so many weeks, new things come out. I was like, if somebody doesn't mention Queen's Gambit sometime soon, I'm gonna lose my mind. It was great. So for anybody who haven't watched that yet, absolutely do it. One thing before we take a quick pause, because I you almost let me forget about it. We did want to cast a quick poll out to everyone, and so we're dropping this into the chat of the Zoom right now. So um, drop this in. We're gonna post a lot of these results. This was something Binge and I were talking about earlier, and he brought to us earlier today. Like, can we get some of the some a little bit more questions out there so we can start to collect some of this stuff on ops? But we'll take a quick pause. Benjamin, I don't know if you want to throw anything out there as far as what the poll has to do and what we're gonna do with it.
Yeah, so thanks for this. I really appreciate giving me the opportunity to sort of migrate from a little bit more of a soapbox rant into a little bit more of a structured data, sort of survey oriented situation here.
Yeah.
So, the title of this was Sales and Marketing Ops. What's the secret sauce? And let's talk about those specific roles. Now, my bias on all of this is how can we talk about sales and marketing ops inside of a RevOps framework? What does that transition look like? How does it play nicely together? So, this survey basically says, look, um, are you part of sales or marketing? Pick one. Then it's basically the two same questions, but in opposite orders that say, when you think about Q1, I have the following attitude about, here's a couple questions. And I think that sales, or if you're in marketing, and marketing, if you're in sales, has this attitude about the following. It's a different set of questions, but the idea here is to see how you feel in your silo and about the other department. And then I want to see if we can get enough, like a high enough N value here, that we can draw some interesting correlations and actually produce some recommendations to leadership and to individual contributors that say, like, look, if you're in marketing, statistically speaking, it looks like a lot of people are talking about being worried about this. You think other people are worried about this. In fact, they're confident, or like, no, they're they're also super worried. Um, Maybe we can start to have a conversation about what that sort of alignment looks like in Q1 and Q2 of next year.
I love that. Again, we just posted the survey in the chat here. I also dropped it into the Shops Talk channel in WizOps. So please fill that in. I love the name of it. Marketing and Sales Ops walks into a bar. That just
Yeah.
it's the perfect name for this type of survey. So
I
great.
mean, honestly, that was just wishful thinking.
I love it. Well, hey, hopefully maybe in 21 or 22, depending on whenever we can all start getting together again, we can do that. So I'm going to toss a couple other ones out there at you. Don't know if we have time for all of them, but um, how do you prefer to eat your leftover pizza, Benjamin?
Back in the oven, 10 minutes at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Don't wait for it to preheat. It doesn't need it. It's already been cooked once. Just get it a little crispy.
Ah, too good, too good. I always joke, and sometimes it's a little it's tough hearing some people just say like toss it in the microwave. Like that's almost serial killer status to me. So
Mm,
can't do it.
soggy and
Yep.
I can't do it.
I love it. So this is always a fun one, and I think we might have a couple of questions coming through. So I'll ask this one, and then we'll look at to see if there's some Q&A. If you were to look back at yourself and reflect on your time in operations, what would you tell an earlier version of yourself about what you've learned along the way? How would you give yourself some guidance now, retrospectively?
The imposter syndrome you are feeling, it's not yours. You don't need that. It's useful because it will keep you humble, and you do need that. Um,
Gosh,
but I remember, because again, like my background, I was working in international finance, and like still the majority of my lived experience was as like a performing artist. And I'm sitting here going like, why do I have control over like Germany and like Japan and security permissions? It's like, oh, who let me do this? Who thought this was a good idea? And then I remember looking around going, oh, this is all wrong. Oh, this is not complicated. Like, it's complex, but it's not hard.
yeah,
Surely that can't be right. Surely there are people here who have gone to school for account, for finance, for business. Like, there's all of this expertise here. There's all of this legacy. surely it can't all just be tradition.
Yeah.
Surely there can't actually be a simpler way. And the more I go through this, the more the depth of my understanding increases. But I still do believe that a lot of this is legacy tradition that has been built up as like this sedimentary layers of process that we are still trying to excavate into something that is more streamlined and effective.
God, too good. I I agree. I can't remember what channel it was now in WizOps. Somebody's gonna remind me, I'm sure, when we were talking about imposter syndrome and that being like a commonality. There's something to that in the operations world. I remember the very first time I felt that. Um, First operations role. I was like maybe 3 or 4 months into it, and it was the first time somebody ever came to me and said, "Congratulations, Brad. Here's your admin license to Salesforce.
Yeah,
Don't screw it up." I'm like, "What? Okay." And like 3 months later, the CEO is coming to me like, "Hey, we've got a board meeting in a couple weeks. I need you to start pulling all this data. And by the way, these are the fields that you built the last 2 months. I hope they're right." And I'm like,
yeah,
I don't I didn't know what I was doing when I was building those, and now you're gonna start showing that data to the board, and you start to get that sense of like anxiety. You get a little like tight, and you're like, man, and am I really making that big of an impact here? Because I'm the one that built these fields, and now they're reporting on it. It's going to the board. Like, I hope I didn't mess it up. But it's a constant reminder of just the importance that ops plays in every group. Like, if we weren't there, who is going to go build those fields correctly? Who is going to go help do this and make sure that these reports are correct and the metrics are right? And whether it be inside ops or leveraging a partner like alternative partners for operations, like the role is needed. And now more than ever. I mean, I imagine you would agree.
I do. I do. So I know we're just about at time, but like I wanted to ask, I have a general theory as to why this happens.
Yeah.
And there's something in how we acquire headcount for this sort of an ops role where we still want to throw the word admin. And admin, I think we still have this sort of like old feeling as an entry level thing. Like admins are entry, they're filling in data, they're not doing architecture.
Mm,
Even though like anyone who's done Salesforce administration knows that like the table stakes for being a Salesforce admin requires a certain amount of architecture. You might not know why, but you have to be able to build stuff. And so I feel like we have this career, this ecosystem of people who were brought in with no mentors,
yeah.
and I think that's starting to change. Um, but like Salesforce, it's not the first CRM, but like it's one of the older ones, and it is only 20 plus years old.
Right.
Like there's no there's that's it.
Yeah. You're right. There's not a PhD in this yet. There's not like a or like a master's degree or a real degree in this yet, like to a certain degree. But Ben Fuller and I've talked about this a lot. Like I think one of the best takeaway from this conversation is the secret sauce too of finding somebody, a community, a person, a mentor that you can go and find and ask those questions to. I think the coolest thing about the persona of operations is that they have an immense level of empathy, but are also extremely humble. And you see this in our community. People are asking questions everywhere. And sometimes it takes a little bit of gall to be like, all right, I'm going to go ask this question. I might look dumb, but I think the reality is that everyone's here ready and willing to help with so much of it. But yeah, you're spot on. There's just the history of it is very, very small. And I think, again, all pun intended, we are blazing that trail together in the operations community. So, um, yeah, go
You've
ahead.
created a great one. I mean, it's I remember within the first hour of being invited in by Lucy, I believe. I remember seeing someone just like post like, "Here's my case formula. Why is it broken?" I'm like, "Oh, this is where people are like actually going for actual help. It's not just another place to sort of peacock around like LinkedIn has sort of become in many ways. You know, people are trying to reach out. People are trying to just like drown people in assistance and help and compassion and peer review and support. And it's just been an amazing thing to watch."
Hey, it wouldn't be here without amazing community members like you and everybody that's joined us today. So we might have hit start on it, but it's definitely taken off even without me doing anything. So as always, I know we're a few minutes over, but man, this was so fun. Thank you so much for jumping in with us, dropping a wealth of knowledge on us. Can't thank you enough. And for everybody on the call, obviously we'll send out some reminders on everything, as well as being able to put the results from the survey in. We'll share those with everyone, as well as the recording. But as always, thank you, Benjamin, most importantly for jumping in with us and joining us today. Salesforce, obviously, for the partnership of coming in and helping us build this community, make this better, and even really helping us leverage this webinar series. So we'll let everybody go. Have a great rest of your week and great Thursday afternoon. Talk soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.